Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Hello, apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast where we take you through the ups and the downs of the video game world. We are here on your favourite podcast app and YouTube absolutely free. However, if you want to support our grassroots independent endeavour, head over to patreon.com/Dimp Digital and join the community. Hashtag and in pocket. Once again, joined by the reigning and one-time FGL Grand Prix winner, the resident referee, Logan. How's it going? And immediately to get into it, has the wrist recovered? People were very concerned about this injury costing gaming time.
Yeah, well, I was literally confined pretty much to playing Football Manager because it's the only thing that I could do with a mouse. Like holding, I tried to play Hi-Fi Rush, and that requires like effort.
You need some dexterity on your side.
Yeah, you need dexterity on your side. And I was like having to play like 15 minutes and have a break because my wrist was hurting. So I was like, I need to put this down for a bit and play something else. But yeah, fortunately, we're back to. I've actually been ill this week as well, so
Christ,
that's been setting me back. So the world is conspiring against me. But all good.
It's that London air. It'll get you.
Just felt like crap this week. Today's the only day when I've actually felt back to what could be described as normal. So a bad week for the boy, some are saying.
Wow.
But something I did notice on the intro, there's a slight bumble.
Yep.
And I don't know whether this is a sign of progress or a sign of slipping standards. It could be considered both. But back in the day, that would have been a hard reset.
Yep.
And this nowadays, it goes, nope, gets allowed through, which I think is a positive thing.
Oh.
But I know that Roddy will be sitting there beating himself up about it.
He'll re-record it on his own later.
Yeah.
And then no one will know. Somehow.
And this will get cut.
This will all get cut, yeah. No. Well, unless it's a massive faux pas where I just completely stop and can't carry on, or if some noise goes, or even that though, I just leave in these days. That bulldog's usually quiet, but occasionally he'll start piping up. And the only time I feel like I need to go and deal with him is if something's going on. I think, hang on, what's actually going on in that room? Does he need the toilet? Is someone trying to get him? Other than that, try and leave it and go. I just say, let it run.
Makes it more natural, more realistic. People like
unprofessional, many say.
Well, you could just cut it out. You go on the Rogan podcast, they just do the intro and he goes, right. Literally nothing, just straight into it. But I suppose he doesn't really need any promo.
No.
It just speaks for itself.
Remember Colin Moriarty, who does Last Stand Media now? He went on the Rogan podcast twice. I think initially after he got kicked out of Kind of Funny for that tweet he sent, that joke tweet, and it was about cancel culture, I guess.
Yeah.
And the second time, but he said literally, you go in there. You don't. It's not like a green room where you sit there and talk to Rogan. You sit in there, and that Jamie's there, like, right, sit there, blah blah blah. Rogan comes in, says hello, and then they just start.
Yeah.
There's no like him getting to know you, which I think is quite. I don't know. I find that I thought it'd just be they've been sitting there talking for 20 minutes beforehand just to blow the cobwebs off. But he just comes in and sits down and starts firing questions at you.
Thing is, though, imagine if you were Rogan, like you just have to do it that way. Like it's like a 3.5 hour podcast, and you don't want to cover the material because some good material might crop up off air. So you think I'm better off just going, hello, right,
we have to stop ourselves sometimes before and in post if we're planning to do something like talking about certain things. It is tempting just to sit there for 10 minutes and hash it out, and you think, well, that would have made a good conversation. So occasionally we have to put the kibosh on that. But we are here to talk about the ups and downs. I haven't actually, for a rare time, sat there and figured out what's going to go on the end of this in terms of game impressions. So I'll either do that whilst you're waffling, or it'll be, one of those classic quotes where I'm like, well, you know more than me, audience. Sort of let them have the upper hand.
Got the inside track.
Yeah, got the inside track as one of the best and only railway scoop and rumour newsletters that runs in one of our WhatsApp groups. But I don't think we've got any delay news. I mean, I'm prepared slightly in some senses, but I don't believe we got any delay news. So that's been dropped for the first time in a couple of weeks. And we're straight into FGL updates. And what, for me, was one of the most interesting games of the year, undoubtedly, I just couldn't wait to see how this game performed under the critical eye with all the noise going on around it. It is, of course, Hogwarts Legacy. No one else is talking about anything else. And for an FGL, a Fantasy Gaming League, we're interested in the score that it's getting from OpenCritic. At present, sitting on an 85. Now, it was an 86 earlier in the week, so it's taken a little bit of a drop down. Nonetheless, a really good score and a solid score for the FGL. It's in Paper's Grand Prix team, so he's happy with that. And it's also in your FGL Showdown team, taking on Parky. You've now got 3 games out, which puts you 255 to zip. Parky's still yet to get off the mark. But I'll just say I'm very surprised this hasn't been crapped on. And it's partly for the obvious reasons, but also Avalanche Software, in my opinion, didn't particularly have a great CV to deliver something strong in this space, like an expansive open world RPG. Let's just look at the last few games they've released. 2017, Cars 3, Driven to Win. Okay. A clean 67 on OpenCritic. So that's not doing too well, is it?
No, it's not ideal.
Disney Infinity 3.0 edition. That was 2015. A clean 81. So better, but not setting the world on fire. 2014, Disney Infinity 2.0. A 71.
Yeah.
And then before that, we had Disney Infinity, which was 2013. I don't think OpenCritic was running then. So I say all that to say that even just from that perspective, in terms of pedigree, I was thinking, well, it's onto a bit of a crap on, because it'll be an easy target for the other reasons as well, which we may get into. But you seemed relatively relaxed about it. I don't know if that's because you had no choice but to accept this game. It was coming out before the transfer window, but it's come out and it's sitting on an 85. It might drop to an 84 or an 83, but to me, that seems like a massive success given the circumstances that it's kind of been released in.
I think from what I saw of it, I remember seeing it early on, and I think we had a discussion about it last year at some point where we said, it looks good, but is it going to be, a bit of a flop because it doesn't have the depth that's required of such a beloved franchise? But I think as more content and releases have come out of it, I think it's slowly got a bit of hype about it, because it looked like it had the necessary depth that you'd want from the game and quality. And it seems to have largely delivered on that, which is good. But it was a bit of a punt. I mean, as with anything that's loved as much as something like that is by so many people, if it doesn't hit the mark, then it will easily just get crapped on. Pokemon gets a free pass, but Harry Potter doesn't, I think, is the general theme of it. But no, I think it's pleasing. I think mid-80s is where I wanted it to land up, higher if possible, but realistically, I think that's all it was ever going to get. But yeah, I think fair play to the studio. As you say, they haven't really been given a mandate like this before, and then
no, certainly not.
They've delivered on it. Arguably, an 8.5 out of 10 can't be sniffed at.
No. Now, it's still got reviews to come. I mean, it's not out of the woods yet. It's got currently 79-ish reviews. Like I said, it started at an 86 for most of the week and has dropped down. So it could, a point or two further the other way as more people get their hands on it and review it. But I guess the whole J.K. Rowling thing obviously was surrounding it as well. Calls for boycotts, and we know that in the traditional media outlets that generally there's a slant towards more progressive, or I don't use the word progressive because they're kind of using newspeak Like that's a positive word, isn't it? And like it's progressive if you agree with it. But if you don't, what does that make you? Regressive? Like it's a clever way.
Regressive.
I don't. Anyway, but for the sake of everyone knows what everyone's talking about, a left lean or a progressive type slant is normally put on things in the media. And even before this was out, there were people from media outlets umming and ahhing, people quite vocal saying, "I ain't playing that." If it's going to that scab or whatever word they come up with to slander old JK for what would be seen as controversial view. So I was thinking, well, there's two prongs here. Avalanche Software don't know what they're doing to a certain extent with something like this, and it's already been teed up to be crapped on because why not? It's an easy win. But I'm shocked. I'm almost encouraged that the game seems like it's getting a fair shake based on the product and not the noise. And I don't say that to sort of rally those that are super invested in the game, that are super invested in the game, doing really well, to stick it up those that are boycotting it or have problems with it. I'm more simply saying that it's good to see many outlets out there analysing the product that they were given and not really letting the noise surrounding it impact their critical assessment. And like IGN in particular, who have the biggest target on their backs. Everyone takes the piss out of IGN. They're taking a bung here. They're shit. They don't know what they're talking about. Like within the enthusiast circle, they get crapped on the most because they're the biggest. It's just how things work.
Yeah.
But they had the stones to chuck it out, get a review done by one of their freelancer writers that they use quite regularly, and review the product as a video game and seemingly score it in a critical manner, higher than most as well. So it's a 9 out of 10 is pretty big statement from those guys. And I just didn't think we'd see that. Now, some outlets have taken the other approach of not reviewing it or delayed. There were some areas that didn't get codes because the suggestion is they had cited that they weren't going to cover it anyway or didn't want to. So WB, who published it, went, well, you don't need a code then, do you? And then there was crying about that. It's like, well, if you hadn't publicly kind of already made your minds up, then perhaps you would have got a code. But I'm surprised for many reasons that this is sitting on there. Obviously, you don't have to comment on all the noise surrounding it, but that definitely, in my opinion, was setting it up to be an easy let's dunk on the game, and whilst we're at it, do some activism.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment too heavily on it, but I think we do often get wrapped up by thinking that what's put out there in terms of viewpoints are the mainstream. And I'm not necessarily sure that's always the case. I mean, I think most people perhaps aren't as wrapped up in this progressive view necessarily as perhaps it outwardly appears. And sometimes the silent majority is what crops up, where it's like, people like that franchise, they're invested in it, and if it meets that, that kind of ticks all the boxes for them. And you go back to Lord of the Rings or any of these sort of, like, would it taint my opinion of the quality of the films or the product of the franchise if he come out and said something like, not really. Like, I still think what he's delivered is what I want. I find it odd that there's this kind of, because someone said something they don't agree with, it kind of tarnishes the whole deliverance of a product they've provided. Like, it's such a strange viewpoint.
Where's the boycott on the Lego sets?
Well,
maybe there has been. Maybe in the Lego circle enthusiasts there has been. I don't know.
But it seemed all like a bit of a storm in a teacup, and you'll get your critics for saying that because they'll go, it ain't because of it. But if J.K. Rowling's got her viewpoints, they're her viewpoints and they're her opinions, and how she's entitled to those. If a company's making a good game around a universe that she created, like, to me, in my mind, they're separate things. But I saw something on Twitter the other day where someone got a whole sleeve when they were younger of Harry Potter because they loved it and now they're regretting it. And I was like, well, what are we doing here then? Like, I just find it a bit bizarre. But I am pleasantly surprised that it's got the score that it's got, I think, is where I sit. And it's pleasing to see that there are some that are sort of judging it based on the product they're given rather than the noise surrounding it, which I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah. It's I tend to agree with that. I mean, the poor chap who did it for IGN, Tiger Guy Travis, has been absolutely just bombarded with death threats and all that. And it's just like, come on, guys.
It's just a symptom, isn't it? It just amazes me how it's like you can disagree with something that someone said, like, and then you can go to a point of hatefully. It's like it's such like Schadenfreude to me, or like hypocrisy that it's like this tolerance for everything. Like we've got to be tolerant for absolutely everything other than views that we disagree with.
Not allowed.
At which point, death threats and harassing people and everything are completely permitted.
It's fair game.
But there you go.
What I would say is on both sides of any argument, I would normally say there's 10% of people that need to just be eliminated from the conversation. Like they're just nut jobs.
The extremists. And I'd actually expand it to 20% because half the noise coming the next level down is mostly nonsense as well. Yeah.
And I think most reasonable people that cut that, if it's 10 or 20%, I'm going to say 20 now, less people to deal with.
Yeah.
Most
60% in the middle to deal with. The reasonable can see both sides.
Yeah, most reasonable people, I think, would sit there and say, I understand why you might not want to play that yourself.
Yeah.
For those reasons, I understand that. But I don't agree with you passing judgment on others for doing that or saying that they are now automatically a turf if they play the game. All this sort of stuff is just like, no, I'm afraid you're on the 20% that needs to be culled from the conversation. And the word reasonable, I think, is where a lot of people get lost. And the game's tracking to do very well financially. You know, it's been top of the Steam sales charts for at least 4 weeks now. And I think they're on to a winner financially and critically as well. It's got its flowers as well. So silent majority or whether it's more reasonable people that just think, well, you know, it's a video game, I'm going to play it. I'll go with it. In my opinion, it's all to do with the product. If the product itself is being made in bad faith and promotes harmful themes or harmful scenarios, then absolutely dig the product out for those themes. But this game is not that either. The reading I've done, the research suggests that it has progressive elements in it, trans characters. It lets you choose to be a wizard or a witch, regardless of what your biological look of your character is. There's gay couples in it. You know, it's got all those kind of elements that you'd expect, and then you know you can make your mind up whether that's just there for token appreciation or not. I would argue the other side of it. It's there. It's done in good faith, and it's there for a reason. So this actual product doesn't promote any harmful ideas to me, which is why I wouldn't personally have a problem playing with it. Well, I'm not going to because I've got other things on my plate, but I'm not put off by the noise behind it, and the critical reception kind of thinks, well, later on in the year, if I find time, that's one to get involved with. Where do you stand personally on whether you're going to play this game? Because quite a fan, not quite got the tattoo sleeve, but been known to read the books and watch those films. Adkins has pre-ordered it. That's arrived. He's off playing that, so he's going to be enjoying it. And so watch out for those spoilers, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a concern with him. I mean, I'm definitely going to play it, but I don't see a world that I'm not going to get it. I was just waiting for the runway to be a bit clearer before I jumped into it.
Yeah.
But I think I was just waiting for that critical acclaim, which it seems to have got kind of the seal of approval.
Yeah.
And I'll make my own mind up about. I just find the game so disconnected from what an author of the book said. Like, for me, it's so far removed.
Yeah.
You know, and the studio that produced it didn't know she was going to say these things while they were producing it. They're not, you know, they might have had certain views internally, and then they're that far down the line that they haven't got a choice anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it is what it is. I think there are a lot of people that, irrespective of what J.K. Rowling has said, love that franchise.
Yep.
You know, Fantastic Beasts and everything's done quite well, as I understand it. So, you know, I think, it's definitely one I want to play.
There you go. We'll obviously procure any opinions that we garner from the crew and present back with those. Let's get out of the FGL after I just check in on the score. So, like I said, you've got a 255-point lead, a dream start really in many aspects. No concerns there. It's sort of bubbling along nicely. Parky yet to strike back. In the Grand Prix, let's move Paper up to second. Biff's still top with 3 games. He's the only man with 3 games at 226 points. Paper now second after 2 games of 160 points. Critically, it shows where Biff's two sort of blower sub 70s have come in, because Paper with a game behind is only 66 points behind, which is easily achievable. So that's damaged Biff, I think, in the early going, and we'll be obviously tracking people's progress up and down the FGL as the year ticks on. Nintendo.
Yep.
Normally get criticised on this podcast, people say.
Not enough Nintendo content. Oh, you don't like it, you hate it, you critic.
They are quiet for large majorities of the year. And then suddenly go, there you go. You go, all right. Where does that come from? And they're not squabbling like Sony and Microsoft are over Activision. So they're out the news cycle there, just sort of sitting there doing what they do. But every year, I think we've given them, the last 2 years especially, said, they've put out games, not necessarily stuff we're playing, but...
There's absolutely nothing wrong with quietly getting on with your business.
Exactly, just carry on.
The simple fact is the headlines will get discussed, and if you're not really making the headlines, what do you want? And I think there's also this thing where it's kind of like, when you're turning out so many kind of good games, if you like, you kind of just get accustomed to that, and you just go, there's another one. It doesn't really get highlighted as much because they sit largely within that 80s bracket. Yeah. Which is phenomenal, really. When you actually think about it, it's pretty damn good going. No. Victims of their own success, some might say.
Maybe, but I don't think they care too much. They're watching the cash roll in.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, if they digital aren't talking about, it's not the end of the world.
No, exactly. I have to cut a lot of stuff from this show, but their actual revenue and stuff was a little bit down and whatnot, but they hit some milestones, and we got to see some interesting data courtesy of their Q3 earnings report. I saw them first via Benji Sales on Twitter, but Benji, give him a follow if you like the business side of things. Always got the data to publish. But Nintendo Switch has officially outsold the PlayStation 4 lifetime sales, 122.55 million compared to the PS4's 117.2 million. So a nice little milestone there. And this is the real big one for me, the software totals of some of these games. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, 20.61 million copies sold. Splatoon 3, 10.1 million copies sold. Switch Sports, 8.6 million copies sold. Kirby Forgotten Land, 6.1 million copies sold. Xenoblade 3, 1.8 million. Bayonetta, 1 million on the nose. Like, absurd software numbers there. I
don't even know what to do with it. Like, I don't even know where to even begin with that.
Just clap it in.
What do you do? Well, that's all you can do. Just go, yeah,
well done.
Unbelievable.
Doesn't seem to matter, does it? It's they've got something with that Switch in particular. People try and rewrite history and say, well, they've always been this popular. No. That Wii U, how many did that sell? 13 million for the whole console. They've got games selling more than that now.
I'll tell you what, someone's sitting there just going, yeah,
I've done this.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, the only question I've got is what do they do next in terms of the hardware? Because they had commercial success of the Wii, because Nano had one. So everyone had one. And the Switch is also trending towards that as well. But they seem to do... We have the commercial success of the Wii, then we flop like the Wii U. The Switch, a commercial. Are we due another? Are we going to break the pattern finally, or because what do? Do you just do a more powerful hybrid again and say, here's the Switch, Super Switch, it runs things better, you know? I don't know what they'll call it, and go with it, or do they try and reinvent the wheel again? I mean, it's a situation where the people now who are in charge of that have been. They probably weren't there at the start of the Switch. They've inherited this success, and now the expectation is, well, do that again. They're like, well, Andy's gone now. He's retired, the guy that came up with this. What do we do next in terms of a strategy?
The thing is, you got to say the games in of themselves have been good. Like the games they've been churning out. I don't know. It feels unfair to say the console hasn't driven that, because it definitely has, but. I actively find that the Switch puts me off playing games in a weird kind of way, as opposed to encourages me. But I suspect I'm in the minority of that. Yeah. I'd love just a pure like desktop console that plugs into my TV that really has a bit I mean, they're never going to release like powerful consoles. I don't think that's their thing necessarily now.
No.
I think they've kind of got this niche that they're quite happy with. But I'd love just something that just takes the Switch games to the next level.
Yeah.
Or will they have that? Will they? I don't know. I just don't see them going to a sort of a handheld and a plug-in kind of. I personally think they'll keep this model, this handheld versus docked version.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I think the biggest problem I've got with the Switch is it's bloody uncomfortable to hold.
Yeah, it's not. I don't find it particularly. I just don't like playing handheld, so that it's
same,
a handheld in disguise though. The Switch, because even if you plug it into that dock, it gives you a little resolution boost and nothing else. And very rarely is there a significant difference between the games. There are a few exceptions out there, but I would like to see that as well. I just don't think we're going to get there. I think we'll get another halfway house because we need it to run portably. That's a big market for us. And if you plug it in, you get a little boost maybe, but. All these games that I keep saying it, broken records time, they would be objectively better if they ran at 60 FPS and all this stuff. And unfortunately, we're not getting that. And I don't know what they do next. I wouldn't want to be in that position of to turn up there for work and they say, right, let's start playing the next phase. And you're like, well, I don't know.
The thing is, you're probably looking at
it.
They
go, well, growth as well. And you're like, well. What do you mean growth? Just pop
maintaining it.
Yeah, just maintain it. It's going to be a difficult fucking task, but we'll see. They gave us some insight into their software coming up for the later on in this year with Nintendo Direct. I sat through this thing and it was 40 minutes long. It's what I find is there's a handful of things in there that are reasonably, semi-interesting, but there's a lot of what I would consider dross, just packed into the 40 minutes. Filler, yeah. But it's quite incredible how much they pack into these things and how much of this stuff is actually Switch only. Like, it's a different market than what the other boys and girls are playing on, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
But was there anything that you saw in the news rounds that tickled you? Because there was a couple of things that I thought were interesting in terms of release dates and stuff, but I wanted to know from your perspective, someone who's probably more detached from the Switch than me, felt about what was being produced, and did anything you think, well, actually I might blow the dust off that Switch later in the year for that?
I mean, there's Zelda, which is piquing my interest just to see what.
You ain't played Breath of the Wild, have you?
No,
Wow.
not even from a playability perspective. I just want to see what it's offering. It's never been a franchise that I've particularly played, even when I was a kid. So, but I thought I saw that little gameplay trailer, which I think was generous when they say gameplay. It was incredibly generous to say that. So I wanted to have a little look at that. But it's really the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance stuff that I was like...
Right.
And then I saw they'd done one of them bloody shadow drops where they've gone... I think it was Metroid Remastered, where they've gone, here you go.
That's out.
Go and get that if you want it. That's out now.
Yep.
So I thought that was quite cool. That seems to be a little thing that's happening at the minute when they do these showcases. Shadow dropping them, yeah. I like that, though. I like a little surprise.
Can't keep doing it, though, can you?
This is what I thought. When I saw I was like, how can they keep this up for? And then when they don't do it,
you get annoyed.
Everyone's going, I was hoping for a shadow drop.
Yeah.
Keeps you on your toes, though.
It does, absolutely. For me, so Pikmin 4's got a release date, which is FGL territory for some, 21st of July 2023. Who'll be finally pleased that Advanced Wars 1+2 reboot camp's coming out 21st of April. So apparently Putin's not bombing Ukraine anymore, because that can come out now. So that whole
all died down.
Yeah, that's died down. So there's no worries about that anymore. Thanks Nintendo for confirming that. Metroid Prime Remastered is probably the one I'm most interested in. They've been rumoured for ages that they're doing that, and people saying it's been ready for a year and they just sat on it. And I'm like, what are they doing? Just fuck it. And then they went, yeah, it's ready now. And I'm like, well, I'm not ready now. I've got other games in the fucking oven. So I have to carve out time later on this year to go through that. Physical version delayed, though. Or not delayed, coming out in a few weeks' time. Don't know why that... Well, I do know what that is, because it's shadow drops, and they...
Yeah.
you start putting things in stores and they start leaking it, saying that's coming soon, and then you lose that sort of little extra bit. And then obviously Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, 12th of May 2023. The release date there is still lurking. Not sold on that just yet. I think the second time I played Breath of the Wild, I was a bit like, this really wasn't as good as what people were saying. I had that suspicion initially, but replaying it, I was like, it's from a fundamental basics level of combat, just not very good. And I don't know, I'm not sold on that. And again, I need something to really draw me into the Switch to have me sitting there interested. So I don't know, maybe they'll blow it out later this year and I'll be like, yeah, on board with that, or the hype will just get to me. And yeah,
the hype will get to you. Adkins will be on at you about it and you'll have to crumble.
Adkins didn't even like it that much. Fucking gets caught up in the hype for that boy.
He does. Yeah.
Game Boy and Game Boy Advance coming to Nintendo Switch Online. Game Boy Advance only going to the expansion pass, or expansion pack, so you got to pay a bit extra for that, which has the Sega and N64 games. I was initially like, oh, Super Mario Land for Game Boy. Like, I remember playing that on my old Game Boy. Never be able to finish it because as a kid that was impossible. And then I look at the games that are coming. It's Super Mario Land 2, not 1. I was like, well,
you only get the sequel.
What are we doing there?
Yeah,
they'll add it, but what are we doing there?
Yeah, I don't know whether that's just a favourite or I don't know. I
Just
was
start with
never
one,
a
though.
huge.
Annoys me.
I do dart around a little bit sometimes with this stuff. The problem is I wasn't a massive... I did play it, but I didn't actually own a Game Boy as a kid. So I only played it on other people's or went around other people's houses and stuff. That's when I used to play it. But yeah, I'm not as steeped in Nintendo lore as some of you guys are.
Got to release that Pokemon Red and Blue, haven't they? And potentially Yellow. That's got to be in the plans. Like, surely. I mean, if they withhold that from that, I am...
Money Printing Incorporated will have that down as like
that should be sold separately.
Standalone releases. Yeah,
I don't think they will. They've not done it with any of the stuff, any of the Nintendo Switch Online stuff, whether it's for SNES or NES or whatever. Not a sausage has come. The closest thing they had was that Mario 64, because it's part of that Mario All Stars 3D package that they put on sale for 8 months only or something. I mean, what? How they get away with that, I don't know. That's one of the most absurd things I've ever seen in gaming. But generally, 40 minutes of time was okay spent. I don't think it's buoyed either of us particularly heavily. Will the introduction of Game Boy / Game Boy Advances to their various online packages motivate you to go ahead and commit to a month or two of that, or have you already got it and you just might bung it on one day?
I don't have that. No. I don't have it. Possibly, just out of curiosity. But I often find with some of this stuff, when you go back and play it, you go, how did I play this? That's the trouble with it, is it doesn't age as well as your brain thinks it has.
No.
So I'm always wary of that. But depending on, if they put something on there that really sort of makes you go, oh, yeah, I used to play that, like, it could easily tempt me to have a little go of it. But
you can get a year's membership of the base one for like less than 20 quid.
Yeah, I'm not. But it
is
just sit there 99% of the time,
and not get used.
Maybe more, not getting used. Yeah,
fair enough. Anyway, Nintendo doing some good things, some okay things, and finally releasing Metroid Prime Remastered. So good on them. Why has this got to come up again? This fucking Microsoft and Activision by merger shit. I'm done with it.
It's been going on for ages, yeah.
I know. That's the tragedy of it all. It's nowhere close to being resolved. It sounds like at least another 6 months potentially. Anyway, the CMA, which is UK PANS, they're trying to look after us. They said has
Competition and Markets Authority.
Correct. Has provisionally concluded that Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision could result in higher prices, fewer choices, and less innovation for UK gamers. Not surprising. This was signalled. This has been signalled for months, really. Like, people acted like, "Oh, what?" It's like the FTC have already brought the hammer down. Like, These guys were going to follow suit 'cause it's an easy one, so let's jump on. They've been the first ones. No, I don't really have much to say about this. I mean, there's a whole load of detail about why they're doing it, and obviously it stirs up people on the unreasonable sides of both the arguments to pipe up. So you've got to cut 40% of the conversation down if you're flapping around in those circles. You simply have to. The only interesting thing really was that they focused a little bit more on the cloud aspect of stuff and were saying that giving them access and control more importantly over something like Call of Duty, which we've long said is important and is an exception rather than the rule. Difficult to replicate that. It's an extremely popular franchise, and they had some interesting data in there which I thought I'd just share, and then we'll just go where we go. Cloud gaming market share in 2021. xCloud, which is Xbox, 20 to 30%. PlayStation, 30 to 40%. Nvidia GeForce, 20 to 30%. Google Stadia, 5 to 10%. And you're starting to realise, well, that went down the pan. It's struggling to get a foothold. Cloud gaming market share in 2022. So 1 year on. xCloud, 60 to 70%. Hello? PlayStation, 10 to 20%. Nvidia, 10 to 20%. Google Stadia, 0 to 5%. Amazon Luna, 0 to 5%. So you've got Microsoft, who have Azure. You've got Google sitting there with, I think, just called Google Cloud. And then you've got Amazon with Amazon Web Services. And Microsoft sitting there with a 60 to 70% market share. And those two are struggling to scrape 5 between them. I could see why someone looking at it from that perspective might go, how much power are these guys going to get in the cloud gaming market? Because they've already got a massive foothold and they're building up this incredible library of games. If we're talking about trying to not let them get a runaway and become like unstoppable in that market, you may want to just pump the brakes. But does that interest you at all, those stats about the cloud and whatnot? Or you just like, let them have it?
Well, I suppose it depends on a load of different circumstances. Like, are PlayStation actively targeting the use of the cloud more? Or
I'd argue not. They've stuck it on the highest tier of their premium subscription, so you ain't making it easy to access.
So things have to be taken in the context of the services that are provided by these companies. And the thing is, Microsoft is a technology provider primarily. Yeah. So it would be a surprise if they didn't have a larger proportion of that. But I'd go back to the purpose of the merger or the acquisition. Like, why? Yeah, okay, it might increase their share of cloud services, but not having them as well, they might increase it. Like, I find it a bit of a strange byproduct. Like, a strange thing to focus in on is the cloud element rather than just the overall impact. Go on.
It's because the cloud element's the place where they're dominant, whereas the console market, they're not. So you can't make the argument that them getting bigger in just a standard console market is harmful because they're in third place. Whereas if you say they're in first place and actually the two biggest cloud providers are also struggling, this
of what? Like, what? Well, so at work, are they like holding the server for my cut? Like, what's that got to do with the price of tomatoes? Like,
well, we're going to give them Call of Duty. They'll make it exclusive to their cloud, and then they won't be able to be stopped.
Do you know what I mean, though?
They're playing 4D chess, the CMA. Say, look at the future. Don't look at what you got now. Look where this is going.
Like, I just find it odd.
Consoleless future, run by Microsoft. Higher prices, it says here. Fewer choices, less innovation to UK gamers. Nigel would like that.
If Phil's a friend of the show, we know that. But it doesn't mean we're not willing to go hard when necessary.
No.
And I whenever I look at this merger, like, I'm obviously looking at it with a lens of how can it be detrimental to me. And I don't think that Microsoft having Activision Blizzard is detrimental to me. If anything, stick it all on Game Pass.
What if you're not a Game Pass subscriber? As we know, they're in the...
Then what are you doing? That's the real question.
They're in the minority. We've done the data before. We're sitting there in the minority of it all.
So we're catering for people that ain't got a brain.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
Catering for the 40% on the outside, like I say.
So I genuinely think, though, if they make certain conditions, like they've been pretty clear, and I genuinely, people go, promises are worth nothing. And I agree. But when you actually look at it, they did the same thing with Minecraft. Like, how would that be advantageous for them to just strip out all that revenue and not just stick it on anywhere and everywhere?
So,
and I think that, yeah.
At this stage, the CMA has identified the following possible structural remedy. So they haven't said, they've provisionally found that saying this in its, natively, if we just let it go through, it's harmful for these reasons. But they've come back and said, look, Phil, we're open to you helping out on this. And basically what it boils down to is 4 options.
Yeah.
You split the Call of Duty business from the deal, and it operates in its own segregated business deal.
No chance.
Oh, hang on. You split Activision Blizzard as a whole with just the Activision segments. That includes Call of Duty plus all the other titles. Or you split Activision and Blizzard and leave just King, going through on this merger, which includes Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, or you don't do it. That's the 4 options they've gone to Phil with.
So basically, split it all out or don't do it.
Well, Phil's been caught telling fibs, isn't he, before? And I think his own words have come to bite him here. Not 4 months ago did they publish a quite intense and passionate reason as to why they want this to go through, and it's for the mobile section.
Yeah.
So the CMA go, well, you said it's mainly about mobile. What's the point in just cutting these 2 bits out, leaving them alone? You have your mobile bit and you're done. And Phil's like, well, hang on. It weren't about... And then, Phil caught with his little knickers in a twist, potentially. So he may have cost himself by saying stupid things like that.
It's possible. I think they're never going to want to split it all out like that, are they? So it's basically, you ain't doing this. If you buy something, imagine if you bought something, they went, well, we don't like you having all of that, so you can have a part of it if you want. You go, well, no. Like, it's obviously better and it's more advantageous to our business it's obviously the parts of it are valuable, but it's the sum of its parts as well.
Yeah.
Like, all those things together are what make it such a hugely valuable company. You start taking out elements of it and you lose a lot of the value of it. So I don't see that being a goer.
No.
So what are you going to do? Like acquire it, but not all of it?
Yeah. And I don't even know that's even possible for Activision to do that. Like, the other...
But surely you'd have to renegotiate the whole price.
Oh, the whole price. Yeah, you wouldn't pay the same money. And then that means my bet I made to buy shares in Flux at the lower price will be gone because it won't go for the same amount. So I'll be left cap in hand with one of my small investment portfolios, annoyed. But that's what will potentially happen. Look, I don't see them agreeing to any of those 3, particularly the 4th one. So this is going to end up going to the courts at some point, which will protract the entire thing, potentially, unless Microsoft say, "Well, here's a concession we're willing to make. Call of Duty goes everywhere, and that's it." And then CMA go, "Yeah, all right, we're just trying to play hardball with those 4 options to start with, but we'll shake hands on that." Anyway,
it's surely got to be done with conditions. Like,
it feels like that's
somehow legally binding conditions of keeping things, basically keeping the status quo. But then you'd probably argue, you'd go, well,
don't matter, got King. The thing is, Xbox still make the money back. They still make the money. Like, they're not going to make more or less. It might scupper them to grow Xbox itself, but they're still going to make fortunes off the PlayStation players still buying it on PlayStation. Like, it's not like the deal going through and them leaving it as the status quo is an unsuccessful business model. Activision have shown through strong sales that you could leave it running and it will do very well for you. But I don't know. The whole thing.
It just goes back to the reason why have they really bought it?
Well, is it
and they're
for
saying
King?
They know.
Well, it ain't just for King, is it? I reckon it's a bigger part than what people think it is, but it clearly isn't for that. Because
I reckon Call of Duty number 1.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
I would be tempted to say King, Call of Duty, WoW, Slope Blizzards. Like,
Yeah.
so you'd be annoyed if your Crash Bandicoot team. We're not even mentioning them in this. They're like, they're not worth having, are they? From that perspective, they're not going to move the needle necessarily. All I'll say is there's a lot of crying going on again because this has come up. Like people crying all the time. There's wailing that this is unfair and all that. This is unprecedented. A deal of this size in this industry.
Yeah.
Most of these people crying have no legal background or knowledge of mergers or antitrust laws.
Yeah.
Neither do we. So don't be surprised if things hit a few road bumps. Like, this is something completely new. This isn't Bethesda. This is almost 10 times the amount, dealing with properties that are vital and massive across mobile, PC and consoles. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you can sit there and think, oh, I should just let this through, definitely, without expecting there to be some pushback from, you know, the bodies that look at these sort of things. Like,
and they're doing it for the benefit of us.
Well,
like, ultimately, that's what they do under the guise of. But it's basically, the idea is to keep as level a playing field across businesses as possible. It stops domination and monopolies, which is a good thing ultimately for the end consumer. So I'm fine with all of that.
Just seems incompetent, he's saying.
It just when they focus on the cloud stuff, I'm like, well, is that really is that the only evidence that you've got to shed a bad light on dominance, and that's why that's getting focused on? I just think that's the only thing that I want, is some proper clarity on it, but I suspect we won't get it. For obvious reasons.
There's fucking thousands of word reports they've written up for all this crap, so you're welcome to read it, but
no,
not doing it. We just pass opinion.
As always, I need the highlights.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get slandered.
No, I mean, that was barely the highlights, to be honest. There's loads more in there, but I'll just go back to it. Like, just think about the amount of money being involved, and then don't wonder to yourself why it's getting challenged, and don't take it personally. If anyone should be annoyed about all this, it's me. I've got money at fucking stake for this.
Invested directly into
direct
it.
investment. Yeah, I have to sell the house if this doesn't go for. I won't. Imagine
Can
that.
you imagine?
Oh,
yeah.
That would be a divorce.
That'd be a real concern. At least this was one of the investments that I didn't suggest it. I wasn't involved in the decision-making process.
Look, and this is how I see it. I knew I was taking a risk.
Yeah.
Because I knew that this is not a slam dunk like people thought it was.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to take that risk, though, don't you? The risk reward.
Any investment you put money in is a risk.
Yeah.
I always say, you are risking your money, and you go, yeah, but you won't really blow it for me, will you? And you think,
Can and will.
So just calm down. It's all going through the process. It's all very boring, really. And yeah, we'll see if there's any big changes happening in the near future. But if not, we won't talk about it until the next milestone. But
just the last thing, sometimes as well, it's worth bearing in mind that these organisations have to also just be seen to have
influenced.
Yeah, it's kind of like, otherwise, if something goes through and then they go, well, why didn't you do anything? And they can go, well, we did. We flagged the cloud bit. What are you talking about? So I think sometimes there's an element of
it's an impossible
task.
Justifying
what. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's an impossible task because they are being asked to predict the future of the market, and in this case, they're using a technology that's still in its infancy, and we don't know how widely adopted cloud gaming is ever going to be. So they're kind of, their job is to look at it now, but also what it might lead to in the future. And no one's got a crystal ball, so the crackdowns will happen. Just I'll just say, don't worry about it. Unless you invest in Microsoft and you think it's going to make you some money, then I can see you getting very annoyed if you think this is a part of it. But if you're not, just play the game and shut up. Go and play Wi-Fi Rush, sitting there on Game Pass for you, eh? Scoring higher than Call of Duty, eh? It's got a 90. Insane. Anyway, babbling. Let's go to the next segment. It's going to be As Dusk Falls. So Microsoft theme again. Game Pass. Yeah. I played through that. Logan asked hopefully the poignant questions. Can't quite remember what was asked on that one. That was actually a re-record. We did that.
Was it?
An F1 manager.
Oh, yeah.
So,
were those the ones that just went on way too long?
Yeah, one was like 58 minutes long. It was like,
silly.
That is silly. So You've got about 30 minutes or so of As Dusk Falls. And if you've made it this far, we thank you. Continue listening. And we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to the Dimp digital voicemail service. Please leave a message after the tone.
Right, she's Biff here. God of War Ragnarok, really, really good game. I really, really enjoyed it. Very much similar to the old one, but they've not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing. Found the story a little bit more complicated than the last one. Characters sort of came and went and just introduced at a whim. Little side note though, I had just had a baby, so I was quite sleep deprived, so that might again not be God of War's fault, but overall just an amazing game, great combat as always. Definitely a platinum. Yeah, really, really decent.
Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out Idle Game Chat. Got Apps here, joined by the resident referee Logan, and I'm here to explore As Dusk Falls with Mr. Logan. I've played through this a couple of times actually. It's a narrative-based game. I'm here to share my opinions with Logan, the resident referee. He's going to be asking all the poignant questions to make sure this is the best closing to any podcast we've ever done. And much like other recordings, this is actually a re-record. We blew it and waffled too much on this one, and I felt like I may have given away the game a little bit too much as well. So we've returned to do As Dusk Falls again, and once again fronting up to that. And now the guys will be hearing this thinking, well, do they ever do anything in one go? But we can assure you 98% of it is done in one go.
Yeah, I mean it was 99% until we blew that one.
They were both on one day as well. Yeah. So I don't know what we were doing that day. Yeah, they were back to back. So there's some sort of, I don't know, maybe we start egging each other on and just start waffling.
It can happen. Yeah. We've experienced it on the podcast. If we don't try and keep each other semi in check, then it just gets out of control, doesn't it? It wasn't as bad as the other one, the F1 one that we did, but it still was more than's necessary. I think by about 15 minutes, which is
quite a lot.
We're doing this to save everyone time.
Yes, exactly. We're wasting our time again and then saving you time, but. Yeah, if we can save you 15 minutes, we will. And that's what we aim to do here with As Dusk Falls. But I'll hand it over to you, Logan, if you've got any, want to kick things off and get us going.
Yeah, so I think there's two key things to get them cards on the table, really. It's first, where did you play it? And then get me that store description. I think they're the two key bits to get a review going these days.
Yes, so As Dusk Falls, I played on the PC, but via Game Pass. I think I've got Ultimate, so it gives you access to the PC library as well. So it's available on console as well. Microsoft published, also should say Xbox Game Studios published this. So they've put hand in pocket to get this one over the line, and therefore it's sitting on that Game Pass with no financial outlay. If you did want to buy it, it's around 25 UK pounds in terms of RRP, but obviously sales and other things, you might better find it cheaper. But it's a narrative game, and here's what the store page has got to say. As Dusk Falls is an original interactive drama. So they've called it interactive drama, not narrative focused game. So they're getting pissy with people calling it that, it seems. From Interior Night, that explores the entangled lives of two families across 30 years, starting in 1998 with a robbery gone wrong in a small town, Arizona. The choices you make have a powerful impact on the characters' lives in this uncompromising story of betrayal, sacrifice, and resilience. And there's actually about 3 other paragraphs there, but we don't be needing that.
Otherwise, we will not be saving people 15 minutes.
No, so they have to be cut short, those store pages, unfortunately.
And I mean, very rarely really do we glean anything from these descriptions. It's normally just to laugh at them as how far from the truth, one way or another, they usually are. But, I guess in terms of where this lands up, and from I've briefly briefly had a little look at this game when I was browsing the Xbox Game Pass store, and it reminded me instantly of a kind of a Telltale style game. I think I mean, I haven't played it. My card's on the table. I haven't played it. I haven't seen any gameplay of it. But just from the art style and everything and how it's kind of positioned, it looked like one of these sort of episodic style games. So do you think that's a fair comparison of what this is, or do you think we're talking about something quite different?
No, I think the intention is the same. They're delivering a story first and player agency first, rather than a hard-hitting action adventure game, because there is actually very little input you have into the game. That's one of the things that people absolutely won't like. Those that demand tight gameplay and demand gameplay mechanics in the traditional sense are not going to be satisfied with this. I just can't see how they would. But if, like me, you enjoy the narrative side of things, if you like the consequence of your actions, the choices that you make, and being able to go in and experiment and mess around afterwards and replay certain things and just see how big the scope of the game is, then As Dusk Falls delivers that. So much like the Telltale games, where they were story first and gameplay second and performance third, because they ran like Turt most of the time, As Dusk Falls is in a similar boat, where it puts its narrative at the forefront, and your choices are what matters, not necessarily how you make those choices or what you're doing to interact with the world. And I like those games. You either like them or you don't at the end of the day. And I don't think this game breaks any boundaries on either side of that. Like you should know by now if you enjoy these games or not. And that's where As Dusk Falls in my eyes.
Yeah, you've reminded me there about how poor that engine was becoming on those Telltale games.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that my brain remembers, but until you specifically call something like that out, I completely forgot. So that's a nice little trip down memory lane there. So I guess, do you want to give us I mean, it's always difficult with these narrative-driven games, but do you want to kind of give us what the premise of this game is, outside obviously of that description?
Yeah, so you take control of multiple characters in this. That's important to understand, that you're not going to be just one character going through this spanning 30 years as they've quoted there. You'll take control of many characters throughout the story, and they will be from different perspectives as well. They mentioned there's a robbery gone wrong, so for part of the story, you'll take part of people who are just staying at the motel and then caught up in this fucking robbery that's going wrong, in this little motel. But then you'll also take control of certain chapters where you'll actually take control of one of the members of the robbers. So you're kind of in their shoes and you get to understand their perspective, their struggles and whatnot. So in terms of that kind of that narrative arc, that's what you're looking at. And I won't say any more, but you just know that there is they've done a really good job with characters in this game, making these people feel like genuine people, solid voice acting, decent script, and you really do feel like you have agency and impact in this world as you decide between doing X, Y, Z, or something in between. There really is that nice layer where things feel nicely stitched together no matter what path you go down. And having played through it twice, so I went through one playthrough, did a completely opposite playthrough, with some of the core decisions and dialogue options, the outcomes are significantly different as well. So it's got that in there. It's not like this thing where the illusion of choice and consequence is there and actually you get to the end and everything's the same. They've branching paths that stay the course during certain parts of it. And, I've done two polar opposite playthroughs. There's actually in between several options as well where you could fall. So it does have a lot of that kind of the stuff that I think makes these games special, in that no one's playthrough will likely be the same, because there are a lot of characters and a lot of outcomes that can be gleaned from this.
It's often the criticism that I've got of narrative-led games is that they do just give you an illusion.
Yeah.
They don't, and we've exposed it before when we've done, the Game of Thrones one, I think, was a prime example of where we kind of exposed the shallowness
Sir
of
Royland.
Yeah. And I think that is always in my mind. And there's some other games as well, which I wouldn't say are specifically narrative driven, but make you feel like, oh, kill this person or don't. And either way, it's it leads down the same path. So
it's tricky though, isn't it? Because if you just played through it once without the knowledge that you sometimes glean from looking things up, then you would never know that it was an illusion. And so therefore it's difficult sometimes to criticise them. Like if you just did say we use Game of Thrones, your playthrough, never spoke to anyone, you'd think, oh yeah, I had a lot of agency in that. And it's only in me coming along saying, well, I did X and I ended up with Y as well, that you're like, oh, that wasn't as... I didn't have as much as a part to play in that as I thought. And
yeah, but I feel like most people, whether it's as people talk about TV series and go, well, what do you think of that? Because most people are watching the same TV series.
True.
Most people that play games will have friends also.
Will they?
Within their friends
nerds.
group. Well, you'd expect
friends?
it. It's like even in Assassin's Creed, there was something where I asked you about, did you kill that person off or whatever? Like I always think, you're going to talk about it. So the idea that you're not going to, or that it's not going to get exposed, is surely a nonsense anyway.
Beatty makes an appearance for the first time on the podcast.
There he is.
Blurred out.
Come to check on you and see what's going on. But yeah, I think it's a fair observation that really, does it really matter? But I think it does in specifically narrative-driven games. Like,
if they position it that way. I think it's how it's positioned, isn't it? If it is, your choices matter, and you're like, well, do they?
Yeah. And it's like, because then if you find out that your choices do actually matter, I think it ups the stakes. It's always the stakes that make it interesting or engaging. I think if you feel like the stakes are low, then your choices become more blasé. And the choices become less important. So
I do think we're quick to criticise though, because I think in general, if we looked at how our games in Game of Thrones ended up, they were quite different. It's just the events still took place regardless of what we did. And I guess that's sometimes where the problem is. Like a big decision of like who lives and dies in that game. We did have different outcomes, which is quite a big moment. So it kind of ticks the box from that perspective. But I guess it's just sometimes when you feel like you're on this rail of we're always going in the same direction, and the ending kind of sequences are the same. I guess that's what gets people's backs up. But there are only so many things they can do with that.
I think it's because it makes you feel like all the decisions are that important.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that they're not. I think that's, one of the things that can grate on me. But maybe that's not a bad thing, because it's up in them stakes. But I guess broadly, I just like the idea that at least in some points you can have wildly different outcomes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, it sort of folds out, but then it always sort of ends up coming back to the same point.
It's that diamond approach, isn't it? Where you start at the same point, you fan out, and then you come back to the same point. Whereas getting back to us, Dusk Falls, that's not the case. It kind of fans out and stays branched out. It doesn't go completely mad, but honestly, the difference in outcomes for characters from one playthrough to the next was quite... it's quite jarring. I was like, well, I can't believe this is actually that different. That's really impressive from that perspective. So
I think that's obviously one of the really good things about the game. What else, if anything, did you like the art style, for example? Because that could be very Marmite, I'd call it.
The art style is definitely controversial. You can see a lot of talented people have spent time building it and developing it and drawing it in this way, but ultimately there's no way to say anything else. It will turn people off. I'm quite tolerant of things like that games that look different or feel different. It's particularly in narrative based games, but I can see people that just look at this and won't want to play it. Adcock's a perfect example. Put it on, couldn't get into it, dropped it before finishing one chapter. And he's quite into these narrative-based games. I will admit, it took me probably two-ish chapters to kind of get into it and focus, because it was distracting to start with. And then what compounds it really in that area is that you've got this not odd, but you've got this unique-looking game that kind of nothing really looks like it, but it's not really what we're used to. And then you plug in the kind of the lack of engaging gameplay moments, and then that kind of disconnects you further in some aspects. As I said, I'm tolerant and able to get over these kind of hurdles. I just bring them up because I know that people looking at it and playing it will be like, oh, and that's a valid stance to take, because I understand that people want different things out of their games and whatnot, because it looks a bit strange, looks nice, but it looks a bit strange, just to be frank. And then when you come to play it, you're kind of just doing quick time events, point and click, and that's it. You don't have any character movement, you don't explore areas, you are fundamentally making a lot of choices, a lot of dialogue choices, which plays into the narrative side of things, plays into that agency we talked about, but won't keep all people hooked. And I think that's always kind of the balance of these narrative-based games.
So you think there's anything else that is kind of key in terms of things that you didn't like about as Dusk Falls?
It's tricky because obviously there are... I think overall the story itself is good, really good. The characters are very good. The way that they intertwine and how they impact on each other is very good. But there's definitely a feeling of not being totally satisfied once I'd completed the game, once I'd finished my playthrough. And then even doing a second playthrough thinking, well, I'll get a different outcome because I'm doing something very differently. Maybe that will kind of expose that missing piece that I'm looking for. But no, I had the same issue when I came to the end of it. And that's kind of the main drawback for me, is that there's a bit of an empty conclusion of when I played through it. I felt like there perhaps could have been and should have been more here, the way they've kind of done that. So most of the game is really well done. Most of the story threads are all got their conclusions based on your decisions and what you've been up to. But there's still things that I don't know what's happened, and it's kind of like, the game needs a sequel almost at this point. And you think, well, in 5 years, if there is a sequel, it won't matter. But if one never arrives, I'm still going to be sat here scratching my head, years later, wondering what's occurred there. So that's the main other drawback for me, and that's a drawback that I agree with. I don't necessarily think the art style puts me off. It was difficult to get over, but I got over it. And the lack of gameplay moments, I mean, that's just a general thing for narrative-based games, and I can get over that. I'm happy with that. But that unsatisfactory, empty kind of feeling towards when I'd concluded both my playthroughs, I was like, yeah, we could do with more of this, and there's no guarantees we'll get more. And that's a bit of a problem in my view when you kind of roll the dice like that.
Yeah, I think it's like, one of those thinking about one of those Telltale games not ending properly would be, the way that these narrative games build it up. They build it up to a crescendo that you're then, anticipating, and if that doesn't hit the mark, then that, in my view, can really sour the whole experience, because that's the moment you've been playing for. That's kind of the end game.
Yeah.
So I guess if that doesn't materialize, or doesn't materialize in a satisfactory way, that's a really key part of the game. To what you said, you can kind of overlook the lack of gameplay or the art style or other bits if that core element is there and hard hitting and sort of ticks all the boxes there. But if it doesn't, then fundamentally you could argue it kind of doesn't achieve the basics of what it should be ticking off. So I can understand why that's a pretty big negative for you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blower. But having said that, there's definitely a great story to be had here in most parts of it, and it's one of those things where ultimately you kind of say, well, it's greater than the sum of its parts in that sense, because the journey throughout was mostly high and positive, so it does feel worthwhile. It's just that there's an emptiness there, and I guess what really kind of helps bring the game from a narrative perspective and from a replayability and experimental perspective is this flow chart they've got at the end of every chapter, which shows you the decisions you've made and then shows you the other decisions you haven't made that are, you can't see what they are, but you can see the branching paths. And then you can go back and choose a moment in that chapter and say, I want to play from here and do something differently and explore the branching path, you can then create a new save on top of that. You can play it and not overwrite your current save, or you can overwrite your current save. So they've really, this is the most detailed attempt I've seen at this. I think Quantic Dream did it with, what was it called? Detroit Become Human, which was a good version of that. You could see all your choices and how they branched off and be like, oh, because I did that, that's why I went down that path. This takes it a step further, and it's got more of that. It's a more in-depth kind of flowchart and branching path, for you to go through, and you can specifically go to moments to go again if you wish to do that. And it really does expose. I don't mean that in a negative way, but exposes the design of the game. And if it's not strong, and they've got their bollocks out, standing there, cock and bollocks, I would say, saying, "Look at this. What do you think of that?" It's brave. Because if it's not up to standard, you'll go, well, what's that little thing doing there?
Yeah.
What are those little fucking coconuts doing? Those whatever they are. Whereas they're standing there proudly with a lovely package. In all honesty, yeah, they are. And they know it's. They know it. They go, yeah,
like a tripod, and go,
yeah,
wow,
they are. They go scrutinise that, and you go, well, I can't. You clearly have thought this through, and seeing it on paper is astounding. And then obviously when you go for your second playthrough, it fills in more of the gaps. And then if you want to, you could start fucking about doing what I was saying, going into certain areas and saying, "Oh, I wonder what happens when I do that." And that's what some people want in these games. They want to keep going in and just finding out every little detail. And the game facilitates that, shows you that, and communicates it in a way that's very easy. And most other games do not do this. A lot of other narrative games want to hide how the decision making is made, because ultimately, as we may have discussed earlier, sometimes it's a little bit shallow and a little bit binary. This does have shades of grey, and you can see the shades of grey and the paths going up and down here and up over there. You're like, oh yeah, you can hit all this throughout a number of decisions made, not necessarily just the path of one or two. There's all this tangled up mess that you can explore. So super impressive on that front. That's the best I've seen from a narrative based game. It's not something I generally go in and mess around with, but I had to just fiddle a little bit just to see how it operated. And I was like, wow, this is really intuitive and going to be really helpful for people.
I think it's natural when you play these sorts of games. You're
curious,
you do
aren't
certain
you?
things. Well, I think like you do in life, you do things
And you think, oh, I've blown
expecting. Well, you do things expecting a certain outcome, and ultimately, sometimes it doesn't materialise that way. And you go, well, what have I had to have done to get the outcome that I wanted or expected from this? Then, so it allows you to, I guess, indulge in your innate ability. Things that you perhaps in certain decisions that you've made in real life that you'd like to rewind and try again. And it actually allows you to do that, to go, okay, well, if I'd have done this and followed that path, how things may have played out in a different way. And it allows you to indulge that curiosity, which, to your point, is something that you don't, you could do that in a Telltale game, for example, but you'd almost have to go and either create a save prior to that point,
go for the whole thing again,
do the whole thing again.
Yeah. It's maddening for some games having to go back and do things and like just see how things pan out. And then sometimes you'll do it and it doesn't change a damn thing, and you're like, well, what's going on here?
That's a waste of my time.
Yeah. Whereas because it's communicated on the flowchart, you can see it either does something or it doesn't. So immediately there, if you want to go to the key parts and just have a little tweak and a fiddle around, it gives you everything you need, all the tools you need to go and explore and do what you need to do. So absolutely a positive for as Dusk Falls.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice little addition. Is there anything else key that you think that we haven't discussed that's pertinent from your playthrough?
I don't think so. I mean, other than just saying that one of the few times that having a second playthrough is worthwhile. Like, absolutely is worthwhile. And that you probably would have understood that from what I've said already, but I wanted to make a point of that because the difference is astounding. It's really really good.
You can go down a completely different. You can go off almost, if you went down the left, you can go off down the right.
Yeah, you
sort
can.
of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. So in that case, then we'll do our usual trip. I don't think we've come up with a road name yet. Maybe we need to come up with a road name like Dimp Avenue.
Okay.
I don't know. That might need some work, but
what do the Rockies you say? Say Know Your Role Boulevard. So Dimp Boulevard, something like that.
Dimp Boulevard.
I'm going to go down the Know Your Role Boulevard, check into the SmackDown Hotel, and then... Yeah.
I mean, I don't know at what point we're going to extend this universe out, because it's a bit dangerous.
Yeah,
but,
it's going to get like bloody Marvel, isn't it?
yeah. I think we'll pull up outside the gallery and ask that initial question of, do we even get the keys out?
Get them keys out and get that door unlocked. I'm thirsty for that champagne anyway, but this is going
complimentary. So
to patrons.
Okay. Well, it's only
and Twitch members
and in pocket. Yeah. And you get the perks.
Do you get champagne or prosecco though?
Well, if it was paper, it'd say you'd rather have that prosecco. And arguably for the balance sheet, we probably should do prosecco as opposed to champagne.
Seems more Essex as well.
Well, if we get more subs and patrons, then it's possible it could be.
It's in the audience's hand. If they want champagne, need more of you. So tell a friend.
Exactly. So that's basically the premise. Is if we got the money, we'll do it.
Yeah.
But so we're in your personal exhibition.
Yes.
So where does us as Dusk Falls land?
So bronze. As Dusk Falls goes in that bronze category.
Yeah.
Because look, it comes with all those positives that I mentioned, but has some baggage as well, which prevent it from reaching its full potential. And there are many of those hurdles for players to overcome, whether it's lack of engaging or thoughtful gameplay on top of the artistic style that isn't quite for everyone. And like I said, you might leave the table as well, not being completely full from a narrative perspective. But I think it generally delivers on its mission statement. Narrative-based game. What do they call it? Interactive drama, they've wrote here. Engaging characters, tick. Compelling story arcs, tick. Mature themes, tick. Real choice and consequence, tick. And then the Brucey bonus is that sort of full transparency and freedom that's afforded to the player to go back in and comb over your decisions and see how the game's put together. And you've got the freedom to jump in and truly experiment for once with one of the best systems that I've seen in a narrative-based game. So, overcomes one of the big pieces of baggage with all those elements I've mentioned. But again, caveat it by saying these games aren't for everyone. So again, you should know by now if you've been playing, knocking around these sort of narrative-based games, these interactive dramas, as us Dusk Falls wants to be known as, and this will not change your mind either way. You're either going to want to enjoy this and hopefully get over some of the issues, whether it's gameplay or art style, or you're not, and this won't change your mind. But I enjoyed it. Sits there proudly with its bronze plaque.
Yeah, I think you've done a nice little summary there. I don't think I need to add more to that. The one little thing that I would end it on, I usually label that the dumping ground, but we won't go into that. Try and give them a little poke for it, just saying it's just an easy get out. But no, I think, would you say that people who have enjoyed, playing Life is Strange or playing The Walking Dead or those Telltale games, you'd likely expect enjoy this game? Or do you think it's different enough that you think don't use that as the gauge? I think
you should be guided by those experiences if you have afforded the time to play them, because ultimately the satisfaction that comes from those games is choice, consequence, story, characters, etc. Now, Life is Strange is always an interesting one because that always feels like it plays on the better side. You wander around, there's puzzles, there's kind of free-form engagement with characters in certain points. You're picking up things, etc., etc. And another example of those is Supermassive and the stuff they've done with the Quarry and the Dark Pictures anthology. They are probably the gold standard when it comes to gameplay mechanics. And it's really like, how much do you need that element of it? Do you need to feel like sounds stupid, do you feel like you're playing a traditional game? Like
I always thought they were surplus. I always thought that, even when I was playing the Telltale ones, I was like, we really need to be doing this.
No, you don't need to be doing it. Absolutely not. But let's be frank, if a game comes along with the level of depth of as Dusk Falls and then plays as well as God of War, then you'll be like, oh, hang on, that's then the new standard
Game
set.
changer.
I've yet to see it. I've yet to see that, to be honest. I've yet to see the choice and consequence go that far. And to be frank, maybe some people don't want that in their action games either. I think I think it's fine to have these lanes of, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're going to focus on, we're going to make that part of it good. If you want to play an action game, don't come here. But if you want to do a narrative-based ones, we've got you covered. And I think that's fine. There's a little bit of bleed over with some games, like Assassin's Creed does have choice and consequence throughout it and is an action game. But not to the... I mean, the story's not comparable. It's like... maybe one day we'll get to the stage where this is all tied in, but I still think people would get bogged down in it. Like, people who want to play an action game complain about cutscenes and other things and storytelling. So it's like... there are games that are targeting for different audiences and try and do different things. Let them have their space. Let that niche, or however you want to describe it, have their games and leave them alone. I'll happily go off and play these games when they pop up, and I've yet to come across many that I just fundamentally don't enjoy. So maybe caveat that in that I'm always going to be pro interactive narrative dramas or whatever they want to be called, because I find them not relaxing, because some of the choices you make, you think, Christ, but I do just enjoy of an afternoon just sitting down and banging a few hours out on these type of games. So definitely something I enjoy and probably will continue to enjoy for the foreseeable future.
There you go.
Job done. If you want to...
Locked in.
As Dusk Falls, a nice bronze in the gaming gallery. If you've enjoyed the show, thank you. You can leave a review on iTunes, I'm told. I'm told you tell people to do that. And I don't use iTunes, so it seems counterintuitive for me to say that, but that's apparently what helps. So chuck a review in there at 5 stars and say, look, we want to get these boys to get in champagne, not Prosecco. And maybe that'll claw a few other people in. But obviously, we thank you for the time you have spent, whether you were listening or watching. Nothing more for us to say here, though, other than thanks for your time. And ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.